It is on record. Vanessa, welcome to the show. For those of you listening in via YouTube, this is our video version. So let me give you my blurb. Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, you know, every single week we plunge into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Now, this week, we're continuing our journey of sorts across the Caribbean, having a look at these small little islands that call people just like us home, but really looking at that flag and understanding what the meaning of national identity is and the big challenges coming up, especially at the times of post-COVID. Now, last week, we were in Barbados. This week, we're in Dominica. And I'm joined by a very dear friend of mine who I've known for years, Vanessa. But before she kicks off and introduces herself, let me let you know what you're in for today. We're going to be having a look at the identity of this island. We're also going to be tackling the big white elephants in the room. We'll be having a look at the CBI program. We'll be having a look at the recent allegations made and having a look at how that impacts the human experience of those people who call the country home, and also what this can do for multi-generations in the future. So before we kick off this sterling conversation, let me introduce my dear friend and our guest for today, Vanessa. How are you doing on your island of paradise today?
Definitely paradise here, Rajan. Thank you for having me. It really is a pleasure to be here and to be able to share with you the passion I have on this topic, considering that we go back a few years in this, and I go even further, being historically part of the growth of the CBI program in Dominica many years ago. So I'm happy to be here to discuss that because it is scary times for us. And with Dominica's dependence heavily on the CBI program as revenue to support most of its the population, you know, it's concerning and scary considering that you and I have sat down for almost 2 years now, speaking to those solutions and the rather than having reactionary, we wanted to plan these things through as to what we saw coming and forecasted. And here we are now, most of these countries being faced with the possible elimination of a program that sustains many of the countries in so many ways. So,
but I suppose before we kick off, we have nailed it on the head though, Vanessa. Everything that we have predicted, everything that we said 2 years back, even before that, saying these are the growth markets, we got them right on when everyone thought they were crazy. When we said that these are going to be the real challenges coming on, everybody had their heads in the sands, and now it's come to fruition. And even when we're looking at rechanging the narrative, we can see now finally some people are starting to understand the need, but maybe a little too late.
Too late
if they don't move quick enough.
I think so. The opportune time was about 2 years ago. You know, we've always been under scrutiny, all of the countries with the CBI programs, for so many reasons, investigations of allegations of fraud, misappropriation of funds, lack of accountability and lack of transparency. And interestingly enough, I don't think each individual country on its own has tackled that, you know, in such a way to make a huge impact, both nationally and regionally, because there is a lot of the stigma attached to the program, depending on which country you're in. Fortunately for Dominica, the program is better understood because it has a much larger social impact, which is even more worrying because the impact being so large with the positives, if this rug is pulled from under our feet, a lot of people are really going to suffer. Several of the social programs here rely on the CBI. Our tourism product relies on the CBI. And that would mean that a lot of people will be left without the opportunity for work. And
up to 80% of your economy unofficially is CBI related. And so you have to think that's a devastating news. So for people who are new to the whole industry, I know we covered it before. CBI, it's Citizenship by Investment. So it's a SPV, special purpose vehicle, that was set up that enables investors to invest in a country like Dominica, either through real estate acquisition rather than retail, real estate acquisition, or giving a donation towards the government or through its bond system. And in exchange, they get a passport. And that passport is meant to provide them access to many other countries that their normal passport doesn't provide them. And in some cases, just through virtue of birth, just the luck of where you're born and the politics at play. Now, obviously, the world has changed magnificently over the last couple of years. A lot more people have been realizing the impact of CBI, especially at times of COVID. But at this moment as well, a lot of governments have been faced with very difficult questions from key stakeholders, people like the EU, the OECS, the US, North America, Canada. And we've seen a lot of blacklisting come in, a lot of direct threats of people saying you now need to remove this. Europe has underway. We've seen the impact in the UK with the tier 1 visa closed over the course of 48 hours. And now we're looking at Dominica, a country that has been doing a lot within this space. And recent allegations have come up with a case to do with the BVI that people have been saying, actually, maybe the great reliance that we once placed within governments has been overestimated because there seems to be some severe issues there. But before we go into that, let's start off with the lighter stuff. You're obviously very proud to be from the island, Dominica. That is for sure. And I know we met whilst we were in St. Lucia because you were forced to leave the island because of obviously the hurricanes that kicked in.
Yeah.
So what is the identity of a Dominican? What is it that makes you different from a St. Lucian, a Catitian, an Venetian, Grenadian, all the different little logistical hubs across the Caribbean? What has made you guys hold on to your identity somewhat differently?
Authentically original, unique in a sense.
Buzzwords that can cause a lot of issues across the Caribbean.
No. We can actually speak to that because whilst the other countries are more developed, let's speak to those who all have international airports, and we're on that way too. But that CBI funding for ours may actually set us back. Everybody else has developed and has grown at the pace that the industries want them to. Dominica does not. Dominica grows or moves at its pace because we are limited by so many things: topography, geography, and let me set the record straight. We are Dominica, the Commonwealth of Dominica, not the Dominican Republic, which is Spanish speaking, and we're often mistaken for, right? So let's just clarify. We are this beautiful mountainous.
Santo Domingo is not in Dominica.
And that is the northern Caribbean islands, right? We are smack dab in the Windward Islands between Martinique and Guadeloupe, primarily English speaking, and with the Creole, and surrounded by 2 French islands. We do speak both of them. But what makes us different and sets us apart, I can use Carnival as an example. Most carnivals in the Caribbean have exploded to the point of commercial. It's a commercial product. Dominica, however, people would come here for Carnival and say it retains this originality, in that the authenticity of how we celebrate Mass it's not commercialized. Yes, you have the fetes, but how people celebrate is this small island running Mass, the chip music, not the hi-fi stereos. I mean, you do have these large bands, but there's something special about our Carnival that people from other countries years ago, when they come in, they're like, oh my God, this is what ours was. Dominica has a disadvantage and advantage of where it's at and how we are designed by nature, in that we're so mountainous. It's very hard to develop quickly. And because of that, I think that gives us that kind of like stuck in time feeling.
Are we talking about stuck in time as in Groundhog Day stuck in time, or are we talking about a nostalgic, we still have that network of wellness? Because I know there's a story that you told me that I just kept on laughing. It's like you had COVID a few days ago, and this gives a great example of what the country's like. I said, well, what do you do, Vanessa? He said, well, I'll go to my garden. I make myself bush tea. I got everything that I need. I grab my turmeric. I grab everything. I can peel something off a tree, and somehow it's good for me. I can go into the sulfur water, and it's great for my body aches. I go swimming in the sea. I got the salt water. Like, you've literally got God's pharmacy on your back door there. And because you haven't got those pristine beaches that are known for the Caribbean, you also don't have to be performing parrots, I guess, for tourists that come in. So therefore, you can still be authentically happy or authentically pissed off, and nobody judges you. And there's no ministry there saying that you have to act in a certain way or not.
Yes, indeed. That's true. I mean, 365 rivers is what we're blessed with. But in addition to that, we have sulfur springs. So we have access to the natural remedies that we can capitalize on, even from a health tourism. This is something that, you know, we've always thought of, you know, this is the healing island where a lot of indigenous species still grow on plants and stuff like that can lead to proper healing. Just the sense of nature here and the presence actually is healing in itself, and it's an appeal to many people, which brings me back to the CBI program and how it's been sold and to whom it's been sold and the appeal for it. You and I have spoken about getting the appeal to people who are actually invested, not just in the passport for the value and its integrity, but in the country from which they're buying the citizenship as well. So that when you invest in a country, you carry that citizenship, but you're probably a part of it and you're integrated into the society by giving back. I mean, so many countries were built on immigration and having mixed societies. You can look at Trinidad and Jamaica and how they've evolved with different cultures and have grown from that, you know, different people bringing in different skill sets and strengths. And I think it would benefit those countries where the CBI programs are to have this appeal to people, not just to own the passport, but to really own part of the country and invest in it and be part of it and contribute on social and economic levels as well.
And that's what you mean when you mean own part of the country, not in the physical sense, but take ownership of the culture. So therefore they're carrying it almost as ambassadors for that nation. Correct. And is that idea of national prosperity building, that they're there, not just in finances, but also they believe in what the country is heading towards. Now, the elephant in the room is obviously there's this whole case going on with the former premier of the BVI. And in his court case, he has named your current prime minister as a person of interest, or according to the reports at least. Now, I just want to put this in statement. I remember when I was caught up in the hurricanes in the Caribbean, we got hit by 3 Cat 5 hurricanes. One of the countries that went out there was Dominica, and your PM was out there speaking to all the key agencies and saying, look, we need finance to help rebuild our economy. And money came flooding in. But the same PM now has been accused, according to this document, of being involved in some unsavory issues. And this is also a time where you have your CBI program coming under a lot of scrutiny internationally. So we're talking about integrity. We're talking about a nation that is at the forefront of the wellness industry. But at the same time, you have this dark looming cloud there. Vanessa, forgive me if I'm wrong, but what on earth is happening on Ireland there? Because it seems that it's a lot more than just nature, nurture, and everybody getting together. Is it something that people should be worried about? Does it reshift the way we look at politics in the Caribbean? Or politicians in the Caribbean?
Any wise person who has interest in our citizenship or our country, the resources, how we make money, should be concerned, regardless of whether the allegations are true. With the mounting pressure, well, the pressure has been mounting on CBI programs for as long as they've been in existence. I think once that pressure is mounting and you have these threats of the CBI being pulled from under our feet, it's scary in that, because like you said, 80% of the country's revenue is supported by the CBI program. So imagine not having that 80%. And imagine how many people will fall into not having a source of income to sustain themselves. One of the unique things about Dominica is somehow we are resilient people, but there's only so much you can take. And the last few years, it's almost been Hurricane Maria, then right after that is COVID. So as soon as you start getting off your feet, you fall back down. And I have to admit, without CBI, a lot of things wouldn't have been able to have been done. You know, in terms of infrastructure and the development, what the concern for many people should be is that, you know, are we thinking of the possible solutions? You and I have spoken to, we've tried to introduce we've seen this come in, we've spoken to changing the narrative, we've spoken to even how you address the CBI and how it's sold, where it's sold, you know, how you appeal to the investors. Yes, absolutely. We've spoken about all of those things, which most of these countries, you know, if they had followed some of those things, would be in a better place to say, okay, we still have the integrity of our passport. We are not under question. You know, these are the benefits that it brings to us, but here's how we are willing to redress those issues and address the ones coming up. I'm not hearing too much of a conversation on the ground, not just for Dominica. I think all the CARICOM countries which do have CBI programs should be making a huge effort to educate on the importance. And if you have the general populace supporting you, then you can find more span in it to push it forward. But I think it should be address the complex situation that we're placed in, if that is supposed to be pulled from us, not knowing what our reserves are. How long can we sustain ourselves? And rather than just focusing on the fact that CBI may come to a grinding halt, we need to talk about what else we can do. There are other solutions that meet the same objective, but in a different way that, should not or cannot be questioned by the regulatory or the authorities who want to have this type of control.
Well, I think if we take it a step on the side almost, you've got the threats that are coming from the likes of the EU. They've already instituted within the EU, and they've turned around and saying, well, we will stop. You can continue your industry, but we will stop your access to Schengen region. That doesn't affect just investors. That impacts local people in the country who just out of virtue of birth had the opportunity to be able to travel to these far off destinations. Now, we're talking at a time where there's a brain drain evidently happening in the Caribbean. You mentioned earlier as well. There's a big issue in terms of food insecurity taking place. You've got huge issues when it comes to things like mental health, depression that is now coming in. People are scared because of COVID, because there's job losses. So now you've got these big organizations saying, we're going to do this. And the second bounce of the ball is saying, well, we want to know where all that money was spent. Because you got, in some cases, some of these countries have made billions on the back of CBI, yet local residents still don't have running tap water. They still have to get lorries that come to their houses and refill them up. And there's a lot of questions on who owns those lorries as well. So there's a whole septic tank, to keep that metaphor alive, of this whole idea of who does the CBI serve. Now, let's have a look at some of these allegations that come in. As a proud citizen of Dominica, as a person there, as a person who's very close to the country, how does it feel for you as a national identity when your head of state is being almost pulled across the US, across North America, and now obviously the EU, to say this is what your country stands for? Does your head of state represent you? Does it represent the country? Or do you think it's just a case of wrong person, wrong time, and there's just a lot more smoke than there is any fire?
I'll start off by saying there is seldom smoke without a fire. It all depends on how big that fire is. Now, the current administration, as well as the CBI program, has been under the microscope for many, 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 many years. And many allegations up to this day, I guess, unfounded. However, it's rather, it's frightening, actually, I should say, considering that you're in a position where the head of state is under this type of scrutiny, and a country that is beholden to him. Now, bear in mind, Dominicans love their prime minister. There's this sense of great pride and accomplishment for what he's done. And compared to other countries, the CBI program here is a lot more transparent as to absolutely where the money goes. In fact, we tried to push that narrative for Sanusha, in getting them to say, this is where it's going. And for a long time, we couldn't even get them to say that. Dominica, on the other hand, it's quite evident where the money is going to and how it's supporting the social systems as well. So I think right now, in light of things do go wrong, any successful administration would want to have a continuity plan, regardless of whether it be a personal persons that, step out or move from one ministry to the next. There should be a continuity plan with the whole objective of maintaining the integrity when we speak to the citizenship by investment. And if that was the way we could have generated that type of revenue, then we need to come up with the alternatives now, stepping away from a program that calls so much attention and, in a sense, does not bring anything positive right now to the country. And then we need to create new solutions and a new narrative of how to sell authentically this country to people who have a vested interest in it.
How does it feel to you when you type in Dominica on the internet, and obviously not Dominican Republic, but Dominica that comes up? And you see all these allegations against you, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, all you want to do is actually have a fulfilling life. And there's a large expat community. There's a large community of people of Indian origin that call the islands home, not just through CBI, but have come over via indentureship. They've come over as traders, and they find it as a country that has been a blessing for them. Is very different compared to the rest of the Caribbean. But how does it feel to you personally when your country is almost coming through this allegations of sorts? Because people very rarely look at the head of state, but they almost blame the whole country as one.
Yeah, interesting that you should ask, because I look at almost every other story in the news media today. Everything is very short-lived. There's always another story tomorrow to take over that, right? Until it happens. So my concern is, if and when it does happen, what do we do? That's what we should be thinking of, you know. If and when it does happen, what do we do, and what's the plan thereafter? What's the continuity plan? How do we sustain these social programs that are so heavily dependent on the CBI? How do we get people to understand the importance of what's happening and how it's going to impact them long term? Clearly, the airport project, which is funded by CBI, if that comes to a grinding halt, now we're now going to be set back again, you know, how to fund that, because we do not have the capabilities at this time, not through agriculture or manufacturing or export, to even generate that type of income.
And you can't even set up a sovereign guarantee bond, you know, because nobody's going to be investing in there.
Investing in it, right? Yeah. So, you know, you and I have spoken about the alternatives or the other solutions which can have similar, even better impact, because those persons that we would be targeting actually are vested in the country, you know, not just the passports or the accesses that it gives you. But I have had conversations with some of my peers and colleagues within the Caribbean and Dominicans themselves. And the biggest concern for us is the losing our rights on our passports, the travel accesses. If any sanctions are to be placed on us, you know, those persons who bought into the program may not even be using the passports, whereas we who are using it for our day-to-day lives and our travels and business may be impacted by it. And, you know, whilst some people are trying to say, oh, it's just a visa, sometimes getting that visa is a timely, costly, and sometimes impossible process.
Do you think that will create a two-tiered Caribbean then? Because you got some, you know, all are born equal, but some are more equal than others. I think that's a better quote to use here.
Well, interesting that we should speak to that, because, you know, I once believed and supported the idea of CARICOM, that identity, that OECS person, and that where we all should be working for the same visa-free access on this one CARICOM passport. So, you know, this in a sense kind of like makes, because the countries each stepped out on their own, which again raises the point that we used to talk to the CBI programs, not really talking to each other, everybody on their own, until the stuff hits the fan, and then you need to come together. Had we all been working through these programs together collectively with the same objectives, guided by the same, you know, transparency and accountability, we would be in a better off position. We would.
Well, I was going to say, we've like, because if we take a step back, 2 years ago, we were speaking, and even before that, everything we have said in terms of this is what the biggest core markets will be here. These is what our feelings are about what could potentially be a ripple effect in the industry. This is why we believe you need to be doing this with the EU, with the US, with North American partners. Everything we have said, Vanessa, has come to pass. And it's kind of scary, because even now when
I know, I'm now thinking about it, it's like, you know, we really did talk about all of these things in detail.
Absolutely. And then you kind of think, well, now you're at the cliff edge as countries. And the fate of multi-generations, the fate of those people who are yet to be born on those islands is at stake. Not only are we talking about passport, we're also talking about a future economy. We're talking about reinvigorating economy that everyone's a participant for. Is it a lack of will, or is it a lack of know-how from governments, especially within the regions, to actually make the right choices?
This is my personal opinion about the West Indian mindset on a whole. We always have great ideas. We just do not know how to implement and execute. But more often than not, we don't see the big picture. We're very, you know, we have these blinders and we can't see beyond that. So we have some of the will, we just don't have the know-how, and we do not know how to tap into the resources that do have the know-how because we are mistrustful of that.
Yeah.
I think people are mistrustful of going to the sources that have the knowledge and the understanding and the capacity to talk to issues before they come up. We are very reactionary in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, we react, and you and I spoke to the Indian immigration issues 2 years ago. We spoke to many other things that we saw happening, and here we are still talking about the same things, and we have made those offers to provide those solutions many times. And if it had been, you know, we might have made a little bit of difference had we been listened to, I would say.
I think, yeah, absolutely, because I think the narrative would have been changed. But then it's for people on the ground there. You're in this island. You've got, as you rightly said, you got abundance of rivers. Poverty in your country is not the same as poverty in the Western world. You know, people don't. No. It may be a sweeping generalization. People will not die of starvation there because there's always that support net. You've got food, you've got water, you've got air. The poverty is more in the sense of being able to purchase certain things.
The quality of life, it's a quality of life. The needs versus the wants.
Yeah, absolutely. And but then now you're seeing new reports saying there is huge levels of food insecurity in the region, up to 75%. And you're saying that, Rajan, actually that is small. The reality is you believe is a lot more than that. This is on the back of 2 years of COVID, where we saw the insecurities of a tourism industry. And I know in a previous podcast, one person from St. Lucia, Adrian Ogier, said that, look, the Caribbean does not have a tourism proposition. It has an accommodation industry. All it does is build hotels and people come, but it doesn't actually have a tourism proposition as such. So we got that issue. Then you got the issue of food sustainability, because we're obviously seeing the impact of climate change on islands and also logistics. Now we got the issue of CBI. 80% of your revenues are officially and unofficially coming from those sources. What does the future look like to you, Vanessa?
Well, if I had any say in it, it would certainly be different in that some of this money would be going into speaking to all of those issues, so there's continuity. Scary, really and truly scary if CBI is pulled from us, because I do not yet know of any alternatives. The manufacturing section was crippled by Maria. It's practically non-existent.
Maria being the Hurricane Maria that
Hurricane Maria destroying most of the factories and manufacturing that we had. And the agricultural sector, we've been hit too. I mean, from the bananas to the Sigatoga, citrus diseases, but we're producing. The question is, how much can we produce for ourselves and what variety can we produce? And it's making the plans to ensure that we have the sustainable food supply here rather than relying on imports and even talking to exports. So much is happening in the world right now. We're not even sure with the gas prices going up. Shipping is a logistical nightmare as well. And this is where I think, you know, even the CBI programs, had they come together thinking, let's attack the food sources, let's talk food security, and take one of the CBI programs into focusing entirely on that within the Caribbean and developing that. That's a plan. I mean, how can you go wrong with creating food stability through a program that, you know, is generating the revenue to sustain, to push that
I suppose it
out.
comes down to the impetus of what it is, the impact that you're looking to have. Is it about national prosperity building? And then what does prosperity look like for a small island state? For someone like Dominica, I would imagine prosperity looks at your education value that people leaving school would. It also looks at your job viability. Do you develop an orange economy? Then also prosperity has a look at, yes, disposable levels of income. So therefore you have a circular economic impact. So less physical handouts. And then health, well-being, longevity, and then access. You know what?
Well, that was the last one of mine, which is the CBI talks to access. You know, what is the additional impact to us on our passports if you know, there are sanctions against us? You know, how are we going to have the same amount of access that we had before?
Yeah, absolutely. When you walk around the streets and you see the potential of your country. And obviously, again, it's a country that is really multicultural. You've got the large Indian diaspora that's there, not via just CBI, but people that came as indentureship, people that came over as traders. They're living there. You got everybody walking side by side. You know, what do you wish people in the international public would know more about? What do you think are some of the big misconceptions that need to be dealt with? Because surely Dominica isn't known as the tourist destination for a lot of people out there. Obviously, you've got the cricketing side, but it only takes you so far. But what's the misconception that you want people to say, hey, look, this is what my country truly does stand for, and this is why we need to be part of the value chain of the Caribbean, but also of the globe?
Well, I'll start with, first up, the corruption does not seep to the society, in a sense, or the concept of corruption is not down to the people. It's not within the people. It's more from an organizational standpoint, you know, with the CBI, as in the scrutiny that we get, the questions that we get, some of the cases that are brought up against.
So you're saying it's not reflective of the people. It's only reflective of the circumstance of those heads.
Yes. You know, how things are put in place. And again, like we spoke to, narrative and having those discussions can change perceptions so easily, just that we just have not had those open conversations on that media platform. It's easy to talk to a population of 70,000 people who, you know, who listen to you, who look up to you, who see the good in what you're doing. It's another thing to talk to people who are outside, who want to come in and expose. But you have to support where you're at through the systems in place. A lot of people who do come here on their own outside of the CBI program find that there are many challenges that they face in order, you know, for them to even think about living here. So the access should be as easy as, or probably even easier if there's this vested interest to be here as well. And the CBI program, if that supports the tourism industry, like I mentioned, the hospitality industry, the airport, and a lot of the social programs. And we are rich. We're a very, very rich country with the people and its culture. We just don't have the accessible income. And people see it as, oh, you're making so much money through the CBI, you know, where is that going to the people? And that's probably where it needs to change. Maybe people need to feel more of that individual sense of gain from those programs rather than just on a social aspect. That's all I can really say. There isn't much. I don't hear much about Dominica in a negative sense. Interestingly enough, I guess in the media or within the scope of this business, there may be discussions, but the people on a whole have a good admiration or understanding for the program here. Whereas, like I said, in other countries, it's not as transparent. And in fact, the people on the ground don't even understand the objective of CBI, why it was put in place, and what it is actually doing for the country.
It seems to me that your PM did make a concerted effort to ensure that people within society actually knew that this is a program, this is what we can do. And he had an idea to say this is where he wanted to see the economic move to, the economy. But then when you have these really severe allegations coming through, you know, it makes one stop and wonder, especially for when it comes to FDI, foreign direct investment. Do countries like yours then attract the right investors that come in with the right intent? Or does it attract those who are looking to cut corners and they know they can strike a deal? You know, it's
not even speaking with this current administration. Let's just go back since we've gained our independence and we've had different administrations in place. You always find these where you have an investment of some sort that doesn't quite go the way you want it to. So you end up with the proverbial white elephant, an incompleted project and stuff like that. And that happens for many different reasons. However, I would say that from the CBI and the understanding what it does for the country, the whole objective is good. The delivery is good. Foreign investment is there. It's just how we have to sell the country. I think what we need to do is what we're selling. The people who want to come and live here, stay here. Those who have got our passports outside of those who are invested in the tourism product, where you can see them on the ground, where you have that hard evidence. The investment comes in through the sale of the citizenship, and the government through the treasury will facilitate many of the social programs that I spoke to you. So there is evidence of it. We are not faced with some of the challenges like the other countries, where you have these huge projects coming in, hundreds of projects coming in, and they're either being left incompleted, or I should actually say tied up in court, due process in court, where there's legislative, issues back and forth regarding the sale of land, etc., etc. So we're not faced with those. Yes, we do have a couple of projects, but again, that boils down not to the program itself, but to the implementation of the program and the controls you put in place for somebody investing in your country. It has to be properly managed. You have to hold them accountable. If you're going to build a hotel within 2 years, it's like any contract, you hold them accountable. And then if it doesn't work, we should be ensuring that we, at the end of it, get the best out of it.
Absolutely. So if I read between the lines, you're saying it's actually not really that much of the government, is more so the intent of investors when they came in. What corners were they cutting in order to get those deals in? What promises were made? And then what happens when they don't keep that up? Because you're right, as a government, it's quite difficult on one side, because it's very easy for investors to say, hey, this is what the government's like. And you can make accusations, because most times, 9 times out of 10, people believe those. But what happens when you are on the right side? How do people then judge you as a small scale economy? And then also then when you have a look at the communities that call the country home, what futures do they see? Because if they only see large corporations coming in, suing the government, or large corporations getting huge concessions from the government, and they can't see their day-to-day lives getting any better, well, they're only going to stay on Ireland for a very short-lived while, And as you rightly said, there's a massive brain drain already leaving the islands. I know you come back into it again. It's quite funny because, as you rightly said, 2 years ago, we correctly predicted every single element that we knew that will come up. We had a look at the relations with the key stakeholders, OECS. We had a look at North America. We had a look at even key markets. We had a look at what are the ripple effects, what could happen that could damage this very fragile industry. And one thing that we always did also look at is saying, well, how have agents rechanged the notion of identity within a nation? All of a sudden, you had a passport for sale that felt almost like a Del Boy, around the corner, opening up your back pocket to showcase the plethora of passports one can buy for whatever budget. But that sentimental connection, that national identity, that area of national prosperity building was severely missing. What do you think governments would now do? What do you hope that somewhere like Dominica would do in regards to its relationship with agents who are pivotal in the way that your country is represented on the international scale?
Well, let's assume the CBI program stay for whatever reason we manage to save it, right? And we're here. First thing is that the agents need to understand our culture and understand what they're selling. So I remember tourism expos, where fam trips, where you actually experience what it is that you're selling.
Yeah.
Why does it happen for a minority of people who actually do that? Most people do not do that. They don't even understand the language of the country. They don't even know what it is that they're selling. So for me, it is the agents need to focus on what we want to highlight rather than they want to highlight. For them, it's I'm saying it's a business. It's an easy dollar. Yeah, it's sell. So you're going to do anything possible to sell. But who are you selling to? Are you selling to those people who authentically and genuinely have an interest in a country in the Caribbean? Or is it just that they want a passport? There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting a passport that has a great value to it, the integrity of it. But you should want to, or you should be at least forced initially to have some sort of interest or be exposed. And that's where the agents, I think, I can't speak to the selection of the agents, the process, because I know there is a due process, they're presented before the boards and before they're agreed upon in some of the countries. But we certainly have to make sure they have a more immersive experience as to what it is that they're selling, because it expands their market for them as well. You're not just selling to somebody who wants a passport. You may be selling out to a family of 5 who want a place to settle down, where they feel comfortable, they feel welcome, they feel safe, and a place where they can have a future, So by having these agents better selected, I would say, or regulating how it is that we are advertised, not cheaply corner store, you know, like a hot bread type of thing. That's not how we should be portrayed. So we need to control how we're sold, the narrative, what
how
people
you're
put out there, how we're
represented, isn't it?
represented.
Yeah, because it's how you're represented, because the reality is this is national identity, is the identity of a people.
No, this is our freedom. Our passport is the way we travel, is the way we can access places. And if that is becomes a target, now the majority of us who just live here and want to travel for social work professionally, rather than seeing it as an opportunity to get to another place, we're the ones who are going to be impacted greatly by this.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Vanessa, as always, you are one of the most eloquent people across the Caribbean out there. You always tell it as it is, and there's never any type of stuttering there. You know, it's fantastic to have you on, because I know we've covered a lot of space on this, but I think you hit the nail on the head, isn't it? It's literally down to the narrative. A whole nation is built on the idea of a story. It's people believe in the idea of a government because of a story that's told on integrity, trust, and coming together.
Fairly.
Countries do trade with each other on the basis of that as well. How are those countries perceived? Are they countries that are friends of ours? Do they share the same type of ideas? Do we have that people relations? And so it's not really inconceivable that the way a nation sells its own story should also come to that scrutiny of investigation. Yep. And therefore things have to change in the way that the narrative is formed, and that a nation is not a corner shop, it's not a wholesale. And especially at this time where people are much more technically savvy than before, they want to hear those right conversations, don't they? They want to, and they want to feel like that they belong, because both sides could be harmed in a sale of a passport if it doesn't work out. That's
correct. And I think also we have been reluctant to have the conversation on CBI. Years. It's almost like a taboo. It's almost, we make it taboo because we're scared to speak about it openly and have those frank conversations about what's really happening with it or what could happen to it. And frankly speaking, what the solution to, whichever happens, where you're going to go next, continuity. But the one thing that I would suggest with any program throughout the Caribbean, if any country has a program similar, the closer we work together, the more support we have. And had that been done better with the countries in the Caribbean that offer the CBI, I think we'd have a better foothold and more to work with in substantiating the value of that program. But now we're looking at...
Hindsight is always best, isn't it? But
well, we knew that. The sad thing is we've been speaking to this for the longest while. It's just that it just hasn't been happening. Nobody's listening.
But there's still time. I believe that there's still time. This is an interesting podcast. I feel it's more of a conversation about the future and the fate of CBI nations. Maybe it's definitely worthwhile discussion to save. For sure. Well, look, Vanessa, is a pleasure as always to have you. And I know you've always been a strong supporter of ours. And likewise ours for you. And it's great to learn more about the nation that is so clearly evident, is dear to your very being and for your soul. And the photos that you sometimes send over to me, for those listening in, I get pictures of Vanessa by this flowing body of water. And you almost look like you've just found the Garden of Eden of sorts, and it's...
it is.
As I sit here with my grey skies at most in London, I can't help but want to delete your number many a times. So it's in a positive way,
Yes, I do. Thank you for having me, Rajan.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
The pleasure's mine.